Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today, as you can see, we have a beautiful loving scene taking place as we've got a male and female Jurassic Park Tyrannosaurus here, kind of cuddling together. But the point of this is because in my review of the SDCC exclusive Male Tyrannosaurus Rex, I didn't actually have my standard version of the Hammond Collection female T-Rex out to do a proper comparison. I only had the repainted and customized version that I had done, so there was no real way to do a good comparison between the two. However, I have gone ahead and acquired my older T-Rex here. This is actually the second release of it because this is also an SDCC exclusive. This is from the Outhouse set that they had released a ways back where you had Donald Gennaro again in the set. And this one we have again is basically the same figure as the original Hammond Collection T-Rex, but it had a repaint to it. And that was the only difference. The sculpt, everything on this is exactly the same as the very first T-Rex that they had released in the Hammond Collection. So I figured we might as well go ahead, dive into this a little bit deeper and take a look at the differences and the updates that were made to the newer version of the T-Rex here. Again, in hopes that maybe we'll get a new version in general of the T-Rex released by Mattel at some point in the near future. You know, I'd love to see like a new female version with the much better proportions and stuff that we have for this newer version as far as like the feet and everything. But let's go ahead, get a little closer, and we'll take a closer look again, see what the differences really are. So I think it's pretty obvious that the first place we should start would be in the head sculpts. And you can see the head sculpts definitely have a bit of a different look to them. They are very clearly not the same head sculpt. So, I mean, it was very obvious to begin with that these were different, especially considering you can see, not on this side, but on the right-hand side of the male Rex, you do have the injuries and everything that you would find on the male T-Rex. So that was a dead giveaway straight away that at the very least they had done some work to it to kind of give it a different look. But when you look at the two head sculpts here, kind of going face to face, you can very clearly see that the head sculpt for the SDCC male Rex is completely different from the older one. Everything is different all the way down to the scale detail and skin texture, which I think looks a lot better on the newer one. It's just a lot more vibrant and you can just generally see more detail popping on the figure. So the fine detail is a lot more crisp on the newer version of the T-Rex compared to the older one. You can even see it here like in the palate area. You can really see the scales popping better on the male T-Rex. Also, the overall head shape is quite a bit different on the newer one compared to the older one. Even the style of like these scoots moving along right here above the palate area is a bit different from the older one. And you can see again like the bumpy scoots moving up and over the eye are quite different. Pretty much everything is different between the two. Is this a perfect representation of the male T-Rex? I don't know if I'd say that, but it's definitely a lot closer than Mattel has ever gotten in the past, which is a huge plus. But one thing that I am instantly taking notice to right here when it comes to the two different versions of the T-Rex is look at how much better the eyes look on the newer one. Now, they're still not perfect. They still are hard to at times see the pupil, but when you look at the dead eyes of the older one compared to the way that the eyes look on the newer one, it is really a massive difference. So there's another huge difference. The eyes have been improved, but I still don't think they're quite where they should be yet, but we'll get there hopefully over time. Obviously, another huge difference would be the teeth. You can see the teeth on the newer version are a whole lot better than what we had seen on the older one. The older one had the rounded teeth. The newer one has the much sharper looking teeth, so that as well, again, is a massive improvement. Even the nostrils are actually sculpted quite differently. As far as the inside of the mouth goes, and even when it comes to the articulation, this one's going to fall because I don't have it in a good spot, but as you open it, you can see you still have like, or at least with the older one, you had the two kind of areas of articulation where you open it, and have basically two lengths you can open it. Once you open it, you've got one than 2. So it's the same as far as that goes. When it comes to the inside of the mouth, you'll see that the tongue definitely looks the same. We've got, honestly, the same detail everywhere inside the mouth. I'm really not noticing anything different in here as far as that goes, but obviously there's a bit more paint application to the male Rex, as we have kind of like a red wash there on the tongue that definitely adds another level of detail. And you can see, again, that same thing for the skin stretching here on the inside of the mouth. The older one looks like it did have a little variation of color, but not quite as nice as what we see on this newer one. Now, another thing that I was really quite curious about is the neck. Was the neck, and specifically the throat, at all any different on the male Rex compared to the female? Because it really should be. If we are following the designs from the film, the male has kind of like a little bit of hanging skin, a little bit more bulkiness to the throat area, and just generally a little bit of a different look. But when we see the two together, we can very clearly see that for the most part, it is the same as the female Rex. They didn't really add any more bulkiness, and in fact, this part here, the kind of like softer rubbery area here, is exactly the same as what we have on the older one. You could even see the way that the skin looks and everything is exactly the same when it comes to like the skin folds and stuff. This little area here does look a little bit different, but not by much, and I think that's mostly due to the fact that the detail on the newer one looks a little more crisp, but I would absolutely say that there was a little bit of re-sculpting in this area of the neck for the male Rex compared to the female, making it look a little bit more crisp, a little bit more impressive than what we have for the female Rex. And you can see, again, the shape and everything to the top of the neck looks pretty much or very close to the same, maybe slightly different. So I would say, so far, when it comes to this Rex, the head and this area here, the upper part of the neck, is all different from the older one. But once we hit this little area of like that rubber skin in the neck, that's where it starts to kind of show us the older parts that were reused for this newer Rex. So no differences as far as that area goes. Also, as you move down the necks, you'll notice that, again, you do have the same seams. So you've got the same neck articulation. As you move down into the body itself, you very much so have the same upper body for the male that you had for the female. It's very obvious looking at these two. Of course, you still have that center midsection joint right there. That hasn't changed for the Rex. We have the same kind of like dip in the back right there that you see for the male. So obviously this second half of the body appears to be exactly the same as well. The second half of like the torso area. When it comes to the arms, you can definitely see that they are the same. You know, the sculpt hasn't changed as far as the arms. The musculature looks the same. You still have the same articulated joints. They're just in a slightly different position currently. If I turn this and kind of turn the wrist, give us a better... Oh, actually, I think I have the wrist more so like that. So now you can see, again, they are exactly the same. I also should have actually bent the elbow right here, which I remember it being a little stiff, so I didn't move it a whole lot in the review. But there you can see that, again, the arms are definitely the same. The fingers are the same. The claws are the same, which is upsetting because recently Mattel has started to kind of implement like rubber fingers and stuff, which has allowed some of the finger claws to be a little bit sharper looking. But unfortunately for this one, we still have those older claws. So no improvements in that area. Also, one thing I did say in my actual review was I wonder, let's just put him down for a second, if the older one had that specific style to the skin texture on the underside. It's not very vibrant, but it was definitely there. So that's another thing that shows you that, again, the actual body and everything is exactly the same on the older one as it is on the newer one. Now, the other area that is probably holding the biggest difference between the two is the feet. But before we get to the feet, as you move down the legs, you can very clearly see that articulation-wise, it's exactly the same. The body parts, the thigh, the calf, everything to me looks to be exactly the same. There's some very obvious dead giveaways, like the fine detail right here with the way that the skin kind of wrinkles around the calf muscle. You see the same thing over there on the males. So it looks as though everything is the same in the legs sculpt-wise as you move down until you get down here to the feet. And once we get down to the feet, obviously there have been massive improvements in that area because you have giant clown feet for the older Hammond Collection T-Rex. And if we actually bring one foot here next to the other, you can really get a good feel for the difference in size between the older T-Rex foot and the newer T-Rex foot. Obviously, these feet are a gigantic improvement over the older one, but unfortunately, that's the only area on this newer male Rex that is different sculpt-wise in the leg. It's only the feet, but at least they took the one area that needed the most work and they fixed that. And this is something I would love to see again on a newer T-Rex from Mattel for the female. I would actually love to see the Hammond Collection treatment for the newer Rebirth Rex. But another thing that's nicer on the newer one is the claws have a bit of a sharper look to them compared to the rounded look of the older claws. So that's also a bit nicer. One thing I do actually notice that is a little bit of a downgrade from the older Hammond T-Rex figures is we actually had painted dew claws on this version. I don't remember for sure if we had painted dew claws on the standard Hammond Collection version. I'll have to go back and check, but one thing is for sure, we did not have painted dew claws on the SDCC male Rex, so a little bit of a bummer there, a little bit of a downgrade compared to the older one. And then at this point, the only thing really left to do would be to lead out into the tail, and as you can see, the tail is exactly the same. We've got the same like seams and everything in the same spots. Kind of looks like this one's a little bit bigger, but that's just because it's closer. I can assure you, if we were to kind of hold them upside down here and put them next to each other, you can very clearly see again they are the same size and everything. We even have the same seam right here in the tail where we kind of transition to the rubber wire tail. So the same articulation, same style, same texturing. Even if you actually, again, I keep moving them around and then they're kind of a pain to put back into place. But even if you look over here, we've got like this little, almost like a skin wrinkle right here. You see the same thing there. So the tails are exactly the same. I do not see any differences at all between the two when it comes to their tails. So I think that's really about it. That's about all we need to go over when it comes to these two Tyrannosaurs. At this point, we have definitely established the fact that the head on the newer one is new completely all the way down to that first joint in the neck. That whole area, although it may have been the same part used from the original one, but it was definitely altered a little bit, kind of updated it with a little bit more texturing, especially in the lower part of the neck. But then as you move through the rest of the body, the only other area of the sculpt that is new on this SDCC exclusive male Rex would be the feet, and that's about it. So pretty much the same T-Rex as the older one with some new upgrades again in the head, the upper part of the neck, and the feet, and then of course a brand new paint job. So that means that it's definitely not accurate to the films. I mean, I think that was already obvious from the start. Mattel hasn't quite put the amount of effort into the male Rex as we as collectors would like. I would love to see a super accurate version of this Rex in the future at some point, maybe entering the Hammond Collection, because I feel like a lot of their newer figures have been really good, especially the Spino is like spot on, in my opinion, to the way it looks on screen. So they've definitely been getting way better over time, and I feel like the head sculpt there is so nicely done that you can kind of see a little bit of a difference, a little bit of a decline kind of in quality as you move back into the body. So obviously, again, showing the differences between the older sculpt and the newer sculpting skill of Mattel. So hopefully in the future we'll get another female Rex with these newer proportions and newer updates, but I would also like to see the male revisited again at some point and given a better paint job, more screen accurate, similar to what we had on the crowdfunder version, or again, maybe even better, because that one certainly had some areas that could have been improved. But I, again, would just like to see a newer female Rex, and then again, a main line release of the Hammond Collection male Rex with the newer updates, but also like the throat and everything resculpted and the body maybe resculpted a little bit. Just, you know, some more updates that could make it a massive improvement. Still a pretty darn cool figure, but there's still more improvements that could have been made even to the newer SDCC exclusive. Pretty cool that they did at least upgrade and update a few things here on these. So let me know what you guys think, and of course like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.